Welcome back to Built Right with AJ. Today we're going to go into the numbers that the industry gives you when you buy a ute or when you're towing a caravan. On paper it looks like 5, but it's actually 8 if you want to look at the whole picture. And the gap between what you're handed and what you actually need to know, well, that's the story of today's episode. So stick around. Quick note before we kick off. This version of me has a few AI rendering artifacts that you'll notice. Tattoos that come and go, a wedding ring that appears and disappears. My son Clayton, who's 15 and considers himself to be the household authority on spotting AI videos, tells me that the real test is whether a person had 5 fingers. I'm pleased to report that most frames pass the test, but we're working on the rest. Right. So before we get into this, I want to ask you something. Do you actually know what your rig weighs? Not what you think it weighs, not what the brochure says it can carry, but what it actually weighs right now. Fully loaded, fueled up, 2 people in the cab, everything you've bolted on, packed in and hooked up on the back. Because in my experience, most people don't know. And that's not a knock on them, it's a knock on an industry that has spent decades publishing numbers without clearly explaining what they actually mean, how they relate to each other, or when the combination of those numbers stops being legal. And here's the thing, a lot of people building up a touring rig or getting a caravan ready for a big trip or slowly kitting out a four-wheel drive for something they've been working towards, you're not just building a vehicle, they're building something, a trip they've been promising themselves, an adventure that keeps them going through some of the ordinary weeks. And that really matters. And if the rig isn't done right, the trip doesn't get to happen. I was recently out at the Downs Four-Wheel Drive Club meeting, one of their monthly meetings. It was a great night, got to speak in front of a genuinely engaging crowd. And a couple of questions came in before that evening that I want to answer properly in this episode. One about rooftop tents and one about airbags. Both of them tie directly to everything we're going to cover today, so stay with me. So today we're going to fix the numbers problem. We're going to go through every term that matters, where the definitions actually come from, and then I'm going to show you something from the manufacturer's own publications that should raise a few eyebrows. But we're also going to talk about what all of this means practically. The goal isn't to scare you to spending money. It's to give you the framework to ask the right questions and figure out what, if anything, you actually need to do. So let's get going. Every bit of confusion in this space starts with people using these terms as though they mean whatever's convenient at the time. But they don't. Every single one of these terms has a definition, and most of them are traceable directly to either the Australian design rules or official government instruments. So let's go through them, and let's be precise about it. GVM, gross vehicle mass. Now this is the ceiling, the maximum your vehicle is legally permitted to weigh, everything included, the vehicle itself, every drop of fuel, every person sitting in it, every accessory that you've bolted on, and the portion of the trailer's weight pressing down on the tow ball. All of it. Your compliance plate says what it is. The law says you cannot exceed it. Important though, GVM is not what your vehicle weighs, it's the maximum it's allowed to weigh. There's a difference and it's going to matter. GCM, gross combination mass, the ceiling for the whole rig, tow vehicle and trailer combined. The regulatory definition says it's the value specified by the manufacturer as the maximum of the sum of the GVM of the tow vehicle plus the sum of the axle loads of any vehicle capable of being drawn as a trailer. We'll come back to why axle loads is doing a lot of work. BTC, braked towing capacity. This is the number on the brochure, the one the salesman leads with. The maximum mass of a trailer with its own brake system that the vehicle is rated to tow. BTC equals the maximum ATM, the total trailer mass that the vehicle can pull. ATM, aggregate trailer mass, a trailer specification, not a tow vehicle specification. The maximum the fully loaded trailer can weigh, and this is crucial, including the tow ball download. ATM equals GTM plus the coupling load. GTM, gross trailer mass, what the trailer's own axles carry. The load going through the trailer's tyres to the ground. It specifically excludes the tow ball download because that weight is carried by the tow vehicle's axles, not the trailer's. Tare. This is the vehicle with 10 litres of fuel and nothing else. That's the legal definition. This is the baseline the compliance plate payload figure is calculated from. Curb mass. Full tank, all factory options, no occupants. Curb mass is not defined or mandated in Australian law for light vehicles. Some manufacturers use it to calculate payload, others use Tare. But there's no requirement for them to be consistent. And payload. If you caught our first episode, you'll know what we talked about in being honest in the honest use case before any build decision. And this is where that honesty lives, in this number. Payload is a derived figure, GVM minus either Tare or curb mass, depending on who's selling you the car. There is no Australian law that mandates which calculation method must be used for light vehicle payload. That's not a technicality, that's a real problem. So this slide shows the mass hierarchy for a tow vehicle and the trailer mass split below it. Starting at the top, Tare, 10 litres of fuel, factory fit out and nothing else. That's where the compliance plate calculation starts. Then curb mass, full tank of fuel, all factory options. On a ute with an 80 litre tank, that gap's around 55 kilograms. So the first thing that happens when you fill up at the servo on the way home from the dealership is you spend 55 kilograms of your published payload before you've even made it home. Above curb mass is GVM, the ceiling. Everything between curb mass and GVM is what you actually have to work with. So the people, gear, accessories, and the tow balls download from whatever you're towing. Now, look at the trailer side. ATM equals GTM plus the tow ball download. That download, the weight the caravan coupling pressing onto the tow's rear, goes through the tow vehicle's axle. It's already accounted for inside the tow vehicle's GVM. This is why GCM is GVM plus GTM, not GVM plus BTC. The tow ball download is already inside GVM. If you add it again through the trailer's ATM, you'd be counting the same kilograms twice. That distinction is going to be important in the next chapter. Let me walk through this with some real numbers, because this is where most of the confusion lives. Take a ute at 3,100 kilograms GVM, towing a caravan with a 3,200 kilogram ATM and a 320 kilogram tow ball download. Inside the tow vehicle's 3,100 kilogram load is that 320 kilograms of tow ball download. It's pressing on the car's rear axle. Now it's part of the vehicle's load. That caravan's 3,200 kilogram ATM splits into 2,880 kilograms carried by the caravan's own axles. That's the GTM, and 320 kilograms at the coupling transferring onto the tow vehicle. Now, check the combination against GCM. GVM plus GTM. 3,100 plus 2,880 equals 5,980 kilograms. GCM limit is 6,000. We've got 20 kilograms of headroom. Legal. Now, here's what most people do instead. They take the GVM plus the BTC. 3,100 kilograms plus 3,500, because 3,500 is the rated towing capacity. They get 6,600 kilograms. 600 kilos over GCM, and they panic. Or they go and spend money they don't need to. The 6,600 is the wrong calculation. It double counts the tow ball download. The correct check is GVM plus GTM. Now, this doesn't mean that the manufacturers are off the hook. What it means is they present GVM and BTC as independent headline figures without communicating that GCM is the binding constraint on that combination. That's the tow ball download already living inside the GVM, or that the correct compliance check is GVM plus GTM. Most buyers never work this through. Most dealers never explain it. The real numbers are technically constructed to avoid a lie while ensuring the consumers never really arrive at the complete picture. That's deliberate, and it's a real problem. Every number on this chart is sourced directly from the manufacturer's own Australian website or official press release. Not a magazine, not a forum. Their own publications. For each vehicle, the blue bar is GVM. The amber bar is the maximum brake towing capacity. The vertical line is where the manufacturer says GCM sits. Now, we've just established that the correct GCM uses GTM, not BTC. So these bars slightly overstate the gap because they use BTC. A precise calculation would subtract the tow ball download from each tow bar. But even with that correction, every vehicle on this chart has a GCM that constrains the combination before both headline ratings are simultaneously achieved. Look at the DMax. GCM 6,000 kilograms, GVM 3,100 kilograms. That leaves 2,900 kilograms for GTM. At a typical 10% tow ball download, that means the ATM of around 3,220 kilograms before the combination is at GCM. That published BTC is 3,500 kilograms. There's a real and meaningful gap, even with the correct math. Every vehicle on this list was engineered by people who understand these definitions precisely. The spec sheets were prepared by people who know exactly how these numbers interact. And yet not one of these brochures explains to the buyer that you cannot simultaneously be at full GVM and tow the maximum rated capacity for most vehicles. Not one of them. Now, is that sinister? Well, not necessarily. That's how marketing works. You get shown the headline numbers. You highlight the capability. Nobody's job in that transaction is to explain the constraint. That's not why you walked into the dealership, which is exactly why it needs to be explained somewhere else. And that's what we're doing here. Now let's talk about where payload actually goes on a real touring build. Start with a published payload of, say, 1,000 kilograms, calculated from Tare. 10 litres of fuel, compliance plate figure. Fill the tank, 58 kilograms, gone before you've even touched the car. Steel bull bar, say 65 kilograms. Aluminium canopy, 120. Roof rack, 25. Dual battery system, 35. Drawer system and fridge slide, probably 55 kg. Fridge, 22. Full recovery kit, 35 kilograms. 2 adults, 160 kilograms, which is the standard engineering convention of 80 kilograms per person. Then the tow ball download from a 3,200 kilo caravan at 10%, 320 kilograms, straight off the payload. Total consumed, even before a single piece of cargo put on board, 895 kilograms. That leaves 105 kilograms for the actual gear on a ute with a published 1,000 kilogram payload. Some of those numbers will be different on your rig, and these are typical of mid-range values. But the point is the shape of the problem. Incremental additions that each felt sensible at the time, accumulating to a point where the number you thought you had, it's nearly all gone. And remember, that 1,000 kilo starting figure was calculated from Tare. If your manufacturer used curb mass, the starting number is already 55 kilos smaller. Here's a concrete example of what the difference looks like in practice. Volkswagen changed their Amarok payload calculations in 2024. Not the vehicle, just the math. They moved from Tare to curb mass. Honest numbers. The payload figure on paper dropped 59 kilograms overnight. When they were asked about it, their response was, now we're comparing apples for apples. The other manufacturers haven't followed. Same vehicles, same physics, different numbers on paper. You work out what that means. Let me give you a live example of exactly this. It came in as a question from the Downs 4-Wheel Drive Club. So, question was, is my rooftop tent overloading the roof? Short answer is probably. Long answer is, well, this is where the engineer's lens earns its keep. Roof racks have 2 weight ratings, static and dynamic. Static is the rating when the vehicle is stationary, and that makes sense, obviously. Dynamic is the rating when it's moving, and they are very different numbers. The dynamic rating is one that most people don't really know or understand, and it's normally significantly lower than the static, often half, sometimes even less. Why is this? Because when you're moving down the road, every bump, every corner, every brake application loads that rack with way more force than the static weight of whatever's sitting in it. Multiplied loads, dynamic loads. The rack manufacturer rates conservatively for that. Now, modern rooftop tents, the hardshell ones, the ones that are built tough, the family ones, they can weigh well over 150 kilos, and that's empty, just the tent itself, folded up for travel. So you bought one of those onto the factory roof rack and drive off. Depending on what the rack is rated for dynamically, you might already be over before you've even left the driveway. And that's before you open it up, put 2 adults in, add in the bedding, maybe throw a kid in there. There's another 200 kilograms, maybe 250 kilograms sitting on the roof rack. That's the static load, and that's when people start to hear creaks they didn't used to hear. What does my roof rack rate dynamically? Look it up. Manufacturers publish it. What does the tent actually weigh? Empty. Look at the spec sheet, or just have it weighed. What is the total load when the tent is open and people are in it? What does the whole vehicle weigh loaded with the rooftop tent on top? Take to a weighbridge. And what does that tent on the roof do to my center of gravity? Because the dynamic rating is only one part of it. You're also raising the center of gravity of the whole vehicle. That affects rollover behavior. It affects how the rig responds to wind gusts on the highway. It affects how it tracks through corners. The rack is rated for the weight. The vehicle stability is a separate question entirely, with separate physics, and no one has put a sticker on the door jam for that. I'm not saying don't put a roof rack tent on the roof. People love them. They're a great idea. The point is to love them, but have the numbers in front of you, not by how it feels. Right, numbers done. Now let's talk about what you can actually do with them. In our first episode, we talked about the engineering mindset, and the right question comes before any answer, and definitely before spending any money. That principle applies here as much as anywhere. A GVM upgrade is not the answer to every problem we just looked at on that screen. For a lot of rigs, it's not an answer at all. Question 1. Do you actually know what your rig weighs? Not what you think it weighs, not what the builder reckons it weighs, what it weighs on a scale, loaded the way you actually drive it. Mobile weighing services will come to you, an hour, a fraction of what you'll spend on any other solution. Do this first, otherwise everything is just speculation. Question 2. If you are over, by how much and where? Over GVM by 30 kilograms is a different problem to over GVM by 300 kilograms. One is a weight reduction exercise. The other may genuinely need an engineering solution. And where the excess sit matters also. Axle distribution is part of the compliance picture, not just the total weight. Question 3. Have you genuinely tried to reduce the weight? This is the question most people skip because buying something feels less productive than taking something off. Lay your gear out on the ground and ask what you actually used on the last 3 trips. One customer I work with pulled 80 kilograms out of his van in one afternoon without touching anything he actually needed or used. And while we're here, if a dealer offered you a GVM upgrade as part of your purchase package, before anyone asked what you're carrying, before you'd done a load assessment, before you'd even taken delivery of the vehicle, that upgrade was sold for one reason. It wasn't your payload compliance, it was margin. It doesn't mean you don't need it, but it means the question wasn't asked before the answer was sold to you. Ask the question first, every time. And question 4, if you've done all that and you still need more capacity, what does a proper solution actually look like? And that's where we're going next. One more thing before we get there. The rigs I've seen that matter most to the people building them, the ones where it's not just a car, but the thing they're working towards, those are the ones where getting the numbers right matters most, because the trip only happens when the rig is legal, safe, and ready to go. And that's what we're trying to do here. The other question I got from the Downs Four-Wheel Drive Club, and this is one that I hear constantly, was about airbags. Specifically, if I fit airbags to the back of my touring vehicle, can I then carry more weight? The short answer is no. The longer answer is, airbags are just a band-aid solution, and they just mask the symptom. They don't solve the actual problem. What airbags actually do, there are air-filled bladders that sit either between your leaf springs, inside your coil springs, or in some cases in place of the coils entirely. You've also got supplementary systems like helper bags. You basically pump air in, and that then pushes against the sag in the rear end. And what you get is, the vehicle sits level when loaded, headlights point where they're meant to, and the trailer stops pushing the nose around because the geometry is back to where it should be. And these are real benefits on a loaded trip. But the sag in the back of your vehicle isn't the problem. It's just a symptom of the real problem. The actual problem is usually one of 3 things. You're either over your GVM, or your weight distribution on the tow vehicle is poor. Too much load behind the rear axle, or your towing setup is wrong. Wrong tow ball download, wrong hitch height, or wrong weight distribution. Airbags don't fix any of those. They just stop the back end from looking like it. And looking right is not the same as being right. And then there's the other problem that catches people out. Airbags need to be actively managed within the load state. Inflated when you're loaded, deflated when you're not. Leave them pumped up when the vehicle is empty, and you've effectively raised the spring rate at the back with no load to push against it. The suspension cannot articulate. On the road, you lose suppleness. Off the road, you lose grip. The back end hops over corrugations instead of tracking them. And in an emergency maneuver, a rear axle that cannot stay in the ground is a rear axle that cannot help you steer or stop. That's when helping the symptom tips into making the car worse to drive, sometimes even dangerous to drive. John Cadogan over at Auto Expert has done a really thorough video on airbags specifically, and it's definitely worth a watch. Airbags are a tool, but they aren't a solution. They do not change your GVM. They do not fix bad weight distribution. They do not correct a wrong towing setup. Use them with the numbers in front of you and a hand on the inflation valve. They're not a fit and forget solution. That's the principle that applies to everything we're about to cover. The question has to come before the answer. Be clear about this. In both directions, a properly engineered, properly certified GVM upgrade is the right answer when your real-world load genuinely and consistently exceeds the factory GVM ceiling, and weight reduction alone won't close the gap. And that happens. Serious touring setups, commercial configurations, vehicles purpose-built over time. The upgrade exists for a reason, and when it's the right answer, it's the right answer. But here's what doesn't get said enough. A GVM upgrade raises the number on the compliance plate. It does not strengthen the chassis. The same chassis rails, the same axle housings, the same drive shafts are now carrying more load than the manufacturer designed them for. The suspension upgrade is part of the certified kit. Springs, dampers, brakes, and that matters, but the fundamental structure does not change. Toyota didn't rate the Land Cruiser at 3,280 kilograms because they ran out of ambition. There was a reason for that number. An engineer worked out what the platform can safely handle across the range of conditions the vehicle will encounter. A certified aftermarket kit with different springs and recalibrated dampers changes the load capacity. It does not change what the structure was built for. This is not an argument against upgrades. It's an argument for honesty about what they're for and what they're not for. 2 things to go on though, with your eyes open. With warranty, if your powertrain or chassis fail and the vehicle is operating above the manufacturer's design parameters, the manufacturer's position is that it's outside the intended design range. The modifier's position will be that it's a manufacturing defect. So you're caught in a gap between 2 parties who each have a legitimate basis to point at each other. Get everything in writing before you spend the money. And secondly, the insurance. Notify your insurer in writing and get written acknowledgement that the upgrade is noted on the policy. Don't assume it's covered, confirm it in writing. If you've worked through those 4 questions and a GVM upgrade is the genuine answer, here's what a legitimate one looks like. VSB 14, Section LS, that's Vehicle Standards Bulletin 14. It's a national code of practice for light vehicle construction and modification. It requires an approved person who assesses your specific vehicle in its actual modified state and certifies that it can safely operate at the increased mass. What gets assessed and upgraded? Suspension springs rated for the new load, matched dampers, braking system, pads, rotors, sometimes calipers are all assessed for additional stopping requirements. Tyres and wheels must be confirmed as rated for the new GVM and recorded in the certificate. In some builds, differential housings, control arms and knuckles are all assessed for load capacity, and in some cases, depending on the size of the increase and how much of the chassis safety margin that consumes, rails, cross members and mounting points are all assessed for structural adequacy at the new load. Because if you upgrade every dynamic component and leave the structure unassessed, you haven't removed the weakest link, you've just moved it along. The output is an engineering certificate, VSB 14, section LS, signed by the approved person, and a modification plate permanently affixed to the chassis. That plate shows the new GVM, the certifier's details, and a unique identifier. That documentation then goes to your state transport authority and is recorded against the vehicle's registration. One more thing, a GVM upgrade changes the vehicle's GVM. It does not automatically revise the GCM. These are two separate things. If the reason you are doing the upgrade is to enable heavier towing, confirm explicitly whether the GCM has also been revised. If it hasn't, you may have fixed one problem, but just created another. Everything we've covered so far has been about the tow vehicle, and I want to spend a little bit of time on the trailer side because it's in generally worse shape and it's the side that gets less attention. A professional mobile weighing service that operates in Australia reported recently that approximately 45% of caravans it weighs in real-world loaded touring conditions actually exceed their ATMs. Almost half. So how does that happen? It's the same way as happens on vehicles. A battery upgrade, an air conditioner, a larger water tank, a washing machine, a generator, bike racks and a couple of electric bikes, a year's worth of accumulated gear. Each addition sensible in isolation, but together creating a compliance problem the owner never saw coming. If your caravan is over its ATM, a re-rating may be possible, but before you pursue that, weigh the whole combination first. Tow vehicle and caravan, fully loaded. If the rig's already over GCM, increasing the caravan's ATM makes the situation worse, not better. GCM governs everything in this situation. Check it first. What a caravan ATM upgrade actually involves? Well, a licensed engineer who is accredited with your state transport authority inspects every load-bearing component. The tyres. And the date code matters too. Old tyres can fail the assessment regardless of their apparent condition. Rims and couplings, make, load rating, type, and fastener specification. Safety chains being rated to AS4177. Suspension type and condition, springs, type, width, thickness and leaf count. Axles, type, cross-sectional area, load rating, types of bearings, size of bearings, brakes, type and size. Beyond components, the engineer also takes dimensional measurements of the chassis itself and runs the calculations on whether the structure can carry the proposed new load safely. If anything fails, the upgrade stops until it's rectified. Every one of those discoveries is actually good news. Better to find it out on the ground than on the road. If everything passes, a modification plate goes beside the original compliance plate and new figures are recorded on the registration. But two things to be very clear on. An ATM upgrade raises the caravan's rated capacity. It does not rate what your tow vehicle is rated to tow. Both constraints apply independently. The tow ball download from the upgraded ATM still counts against the tow vehicle's GVM. All the relationships we covered earlier still apply. The 8 terms we went through today, GVM, GCM, BTC, ATM, GTM, Tare, curb mass, and payload, are not just marketing language. They are defined terms. Most of them traceable to Australian design rules or official instruments. The manufacturers know exactly what they mean. The people who prepare those specification sheets understand the definitions and the relationships between them completely. In our first episode, we talked about why this show exists, about building something worth having, about doing it right because the thing you're building towards is worth doing right. That's the whole premise. The confusion is in this space, it's not accidental, but it only affects you if you don't understand what the numbers actually mean. And now hopefully you do. And I want to be clear about something. This is not about taking shots at the people who make and sell the gear. A lot of them do genuinely good work and have a lot of respect for what they build and what they enable. But car people, and I'm absolutely one of them, we buy with our hearts. We see the capability numbers. We picture the trip in our heads. And something in us just goes, yep, that'll do. And that's easy to get caught up in that. Aspirational thinking is half the fun of being a car person, dreaming what can be. But aspirational thinking and practical reality are two different conversations. And without someone to help bridge that gap, one of them leads pretty reliably to buyer's remorse. The dealer doesn't get paid for you to stop and have a good think about it. The brochure isn't designed to make you go, do I actually need this? That's not what either of them are for. So I'll be the guy that does that for you. That's my job. I'm not being adversarial. I just want to be the guy in the room that says, wait a minute, let's actually think about this before we commit. The practical counterweight to aspirational purchases. That's what the show is. Before you spend anything, get the rig weighed, do an honest assessment, ask the 4 questions in order. And if after all that you still need engineering, well, that's what we're here for. Head across to the website at totalengineeringmods.com.au. Hit up Ask Willie. It's free and it's the right place to start, and we can take it from there. And hey guys, take it easy out there.